Hello, welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw, and today we're going back in time with Willamette Heritage Center, today kicking off its Summer of 1909 events, which begins with an exhibit celebrating Caralyn B. Shelton, who was the nation's first female governor. What? Yes, it's official, and before American women even got the right to vote. My guest today is Kylie Pine, the Curator and Collections Manager of the Willamette Heritage Center. Hi, Kylie. Good to see you. And you're looking dressed for the day.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, tell us, the summer of 1909, now what made that a special occasion?
Well, we've been wanting to do this exhibit about Caralyn B. Shelton, and of course the events in her life that kind of set off her tenure as the nation's first female governor happened in 1909, and we were looking through the rest of the events on our calendar and realized, well, we're opening the caboose up too this September, and it was built in 1909, and we should really make this a whole 1909 themed summer. So in addition to those two big events, we'll be doing another exhibit that will be looking at what Salem looked like in 1909 when both of these two things came to pass.
Who was Caralyn, and how in the world did she get to be the nation's first female governor?
Well, she definitely would not have been the candidate that you thought would have been the person to put in that position, but it really was an interesting mix of both circumstances unique to Oregon's government and also a push by the person she was working for at the time to make a statement about women's suffrage in a way that he was not able to do in other political channels. So Caralyn B. Shelton was born in Union, Oregon. Her childhood was marked with a lot of tragedy. Her father was mysteriously killed when she was quite young. Her mother died very soon after that, and she and her siblings were kind of shuffled around to other family members, and then eventually ended up in the custody of the Shelton family. And it was also not a good situation for her either. There's a scandalous marriage that happens between her guardian, who was 30 years her senior. She's about 15, 16 years old. He secretly divorces his wife and takes her over the border into Idaho and marries her, and then there's this huge scandal that erupts after that because the first wife of Shelton, was able to get the divorce annulled. So and her husband at the time died pretty soon after that. So we end up with Caralyn B. Shelton not even quite a widow before she's 18 years old.
Oh, so orphaned at 11?
Oh my gosh, it's horrible. But somehow out of that, and out of necessity, she finds a skill that is marketable for women at the time, which is stenography. So the idea of working in an office setting and taking down dictation, writing letters, and doing those types of things, and typing, and doing those skills was able to get her into the law office of an up-and-coming attorney named George Chamberlain. And Chamberlain was on the political rise. He started out getting appointed to district attorney and then attorney general, and then was elected to become governor of Oregon. And throughout that process, she follows him on his political trajectory, serving as his stenographer and eventually his private secretary. And then fate kind of intervenes as well. Again. So George Chamberlain was a Democrat in an Oregon state political legislature filled with Republicans, a Republican majority. And it's about the time when Oregon is going and trialing out this direct primary system where they're actually electing their federal senators and congressmen and women, mostly men at the time, through a direct vote. Before that time, the Oregon legislature voted and elected who would become the federal representatives. So it's a big kind of political intrigue mess. But Chamberlain, as governor, is elected to become U.S. Senator. And this angers a lot of the Republican-led House and Senate. And there's a lot of maneuvering because the Senate has to approve the appointment of him to the U.S. Senate. And you got to remember, too, at the time, in 1909, the Senate's really far away from Salem, Oregon. It's a multi-day travel. You don't just hop on an airplane and go, right? It's going to take a little bit of time.
Not a doubt here. No.
So there's a lot of maneuvering. And kind of in the meantime, Chamberlain has been a really big proponent of women's suffrage. By this point in time, the people of Oregon have been asked 4 times if they're going to approve, well, the people of Oregon, the voting men of Oregon are asked if they're going to approve women's suffrage 4 times, and 4 times the measure is defeated. And he is on the record being very very pro women's suffrage. And he kind of sees this, I think, as an opportunity to do a few things. Number one, he's going to stay governor until he steps out of there and goes to the Senate, and to make sure there's no machinations and fixing of the issue before his replacement, the Secretary of State, who was a Republican, comes in. He's going to take his resignation letter and leave it with his private secretary, Caralyn B. Shelton, which gives her 3 days where she becomes the acting governor, because Oregon is one of the few states in the nation that does not have a lieutenant governor position, right? So in practice, when the governor went away, they would leave their secretary in charge of the state house for a while.
And that secretary
was
Caralyn. And also at that moment, for her 3-day tenure, was the acting governor of Oregon.
And the first time this had happened across the nation. But Chamberlain was no dummy. He knew that this was going to get picked up by the news media. And I think that's the real story here, is that he saw this as an opportunity to leverage a national news media into this frenzy about putting a woman in charge of a state and making a statement that it's possible to do, that nothing bad happened in the 3 days that she was there, and that there's to provide a little bit of awareness that it's a possibility and get his message out about suffrage that way. And this is three years before Oregon would pass the right to vote for women successfully, after their many failures, and then many years before it would become a federal rule of law as well.
I was going to ask about that, because this made her an international celebrity, did it not?
Yeah, newspapers as far away as Berlin. We have in the exhibit you'll be able to see news clippings that showcase her celebrity being picked up in German newspapers all across the country. There's headlines all over, from Boston to Roundup, Montana. It was a big story, and again, she didn't have tons of political power in and of itself, serving for 3 days, but it was the power really came, and the statement really came from that media maelstrom that came out of that really symbolic step.
I think people need to know more about this story, because it actually set a standard for what people could expect from a female governor.
Absolutely.
Even if it was a 3-day symbolic tenure. It was a tenure.
It was a tenure. It was, and it was the first time it had ever happened in the country, and it was a big deal. And then when she goes back east, because she follows Governor Chamberlain during his senatorial time, during his two terms as senator, she starts being picked up as kind of the celebrity guest for a lot of women's organizations, especially those promoting women's suffrage. So the big National Suffrage March that takes place in 1913, she's right on there. She gets interviewed, and you get all of these wonderful interviews with her, talking about her time and what it meant and what she thinks and all of that. So it's kind of an interesting connection point to the larger narrative about women's suffrage.
She has a place that she deserves to hold.
Yeah.
And you're championing that.
And we think it's important that we tell our story. We think it's also important that we tell her story here in Salem, because she did have a pretty big connection to Salem. And that's another part of the exhibit that I love, is that we were able to kind of tell about her time. So when she was working for the governor, she was boarding just right across the street at the Cook Patton House, where the Oregon State Library stands today, because most of the Capitol Mall used to be a very large neighborhood with lots of big Victorian houses before the Capitol Mall and the fire at the Capitol and everything. So in that place, she also made a lot of lifelong friends. And it's another beautiful story about her life too, is how those friends really supported her through scandalous marriages, through all of her time working and being in the spotlight, really. And so kind of bookend her life. So she spends a lot of her early career here in Salem, living across the street from the Capitol and doing that work. And then when she comes back to Salem in her later years, about the 2 years before she passes away, she was living at the Royal Court Apartments, which still stand today in the shadow of the Oregon State Capitol. And that's where she lived out the rest of her life as well. And there's lovely stories about her friends helping take care of the funeral arrangements. And we have a copy of her will, which you'll see in the exhibit as well. And it's just almost every other statement is, "To my beloved friend, to my beloved friend." And it's just a lovely statement kind of to how she was supported through her life, through the ups and downs.
How did you come into the possession of this remarkable collection?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because I can give the credit to where credit is really due. So I want to say about 2015, about 10 years ago, my colleague Caralyn B was doing some research on a family photo that we have in our collection that actually comes through the Geese and the Patton family. And it had this one kind of statement that said, Carolyn Shelton, who was governor. And this kind of sparked this, who is this person? She doesn't fit in here. And she was able to uncover this amazing story. And it was very serendipitously timed for about the right time when, at the time, Governor Kitzhaber was stepping down from his position. And this crisis that was similar to this idea of what happens when the governor leaves in Oregon, when there's no lieutenant governor and the Secretary of State steps in. So it was, I think the story gained a little bit of traction because it was mirroring current events. And then through that, we were able to connect with OPB that was doing some stories about her, and connect with one of her descendants, Ann Mitchell, who really helped us kind of fill out more of the story and was willing to donate materials to us so that we could preserve this legacy at the museum and see a lot of the artifacts that you have never been on display before as part of the exhibit too. So it's a great way to kind of fill out, I mean, we know the facts and stories about her, but to kind of feel like you're in the presence of her with this touchstone of the clippings that she kept, the actual newspaper clippings that wrote down, you know, where they came from, and her furs. Her grandniece was telling us that she really loved her furs. So you'll see the furs that she wore, the jewelry, and those types of things that really make kind of a connection point to who she was as a person, more than just the dates and storylines of the headlines.
Has her family been also part of this collection becoming what it became?
Absolutely, yeah. They really have been kind of stewarding her legacy and looking for a way to preserve the stories and recognizing the importance of it.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the summer of 1909. You mentioned a caboose.
Yeah. Another project we've been working a really long time on. So back almost 10 years ago now, we acquired out of the wilds of Eugene a 1909 built wooden caboose. And the caboose is interesting in of itself because it's quite old and it had a lot of its original features within it. But doing some more research through our volunteers, we've been able to find the kind of history of this caboose, and we know that it used to run on the main line for what was the Oregon and California, then became the Southern Pacific, and then became the Union Pacific. And it's been running since 1870s, right outside our site, and it really made sense to start digging into some of the rail stories that are so connected with the museum. You might not be aware, we weren't super aware for a while, but our parking lot used to be owned by the railroad. So there's not a lot of buildings that exist there now, but we've been kind of literally digging into the story of what used to be there, and it was section housing. And the railroad maintained housing for employees that worked on the different sections of rail. So these are employees that aren't like running on the trains, but are maintaining the trackage. And there are 3 houses that used to stand right in our parking lot. And we have some lovely photos. Thank you to ODOT and Bob Melbo for finding that. There were families that lived there for many, many years, and including Pablo Martinez, who worked for the railroad for decades. And he and his family grew up there, and we actually had the opportunity to interview his son David, who grew up in those houses, and learn a little bit more about what it was like working for the railroad, living in that community around the mid-century while the railroad was still at its height. And so the caboose is kind of going to be the anchor point then for telling the story about the rail history of the site, because of course we have the woolen mill on our site as well, and there's a lot of rail traffic getting product in and out of there. But that area of Salem, just again in the shadow of the Capitol, was very industrial. Some of the biggest canneries in the area surrounded our site as well, and rail was super important for getting all of those agricultural products grown in our valley processed and then to market elsewhere. So it's going to be really fun. So we're really excited. This is more information than you wanted to know, but we're very excited to finally be opening up this exhibit, looking at this rail heritage of the site, and being able to provide opportunities for people to go inside the caboose and experience what it was like working for the railroad, both on the ground and on the moving parts itself.
Oh, people are still fascinated with the era of trains. Everybody loves a train.
Well, of course, and it's living history too, right? Like we still have dozens of trains that go by every day on our site. So you can see it, and then you can translate it to what you're seeing here too. And it's important to kind of learn and understand those logistics.
It is kind of a magical feeling too. In the middle of the night, hear it's just
a lonesome whistle, maybe.
A lonesome whistle, and it just, you think how lucky we are.
Yeah.
Right here.
And a big part of the development of our community, for sure.
What did you do with the caboose itself to gussy it up?
What did I do?
Yeah.
Very little. What did our volunteers do? They did so much. I can't even estimate how many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours have gone in from volunteers to restore the exterior, make it watertight, build an ADA accessible ramp so that we have a little bit more accessibility for folks in the community to be able to get up to the caboose and experience it. A lot of restoration work to get it up and to a safe place for people to explore. And then interpretively, we've tried to create kind of an opportunity to feel like you're in the historic space, but also get the stories that were important. So we've hidden some of our signage in different places. So we know from images of cabooses used by the Southern Pacific and its predecessors that the caboose, because it was the rolling office of the train, oftentimes was personalized by railroad individuals working for the railroad. So they often put in their own curtains or their own pictures or all those things there too. So we're able to put a lot of our information on the rollers of the windows, so you're actually looking out of the caboose onto what you might have seen if you had been in there when the caboose was in operation. You have to look into the bed to learn more about the bunks, the coal bunker, the stove, the ice box, all of those things that are there, and learning about it. And I think it's just going to be fun and a different way to experience history in a more interactive way.
It almost sounds like you have something unique there, really unique.
I think it is unique. I mean, it's not the oldest by any means, but it is pretty amazing how well it's been preserved, especially knowing that it turned into kind of some off-the-grid housing at its previous location. So, yeah, it's sat in the wilds of Eugene for a while and then was brought here and kind of restored a little bit to glory.
And that is in September.
Yes, September 19th, coming up.
September 19th.
Very soon. I'm a little panicky. Got to get everything up, but yeah, it's been a long time in the making, and we're very excited about it.
That's great. And the third exhibit.
Yeah, so the third exhibit, because of both of these kind of big pivotal exhibits took place in 1909, we thought it might be interesting to take a look at what Salem was looking like in 1909, because things have changed. 1909 was over 100 years ago, right? But I'm not sure that if you were to get on a time machine and go back there, that if you might not be able to figure out where you were in the city, because there's been so much change over that time. So we kind of wanted to look at some of those aspects and explore that through, again, materials that we don't often get to bring out of our archives and collections, and kind of showcase that.
What did you use to put this exhibit together?
So the Willamette Heritage Center has been a collecting institution since about 1950. Its two predecessor organizations have been collecting artifacts from our community's history for a long time. And true to most museums, only a fraction of those artifacts are ever on display at one point in time. So doing different exhibits provides us an opportunity to kind of reach back into our archives of things that have been in storage for a long time and find ways to display them and connect with those stories. I'm excited too, because we have a really great resource in books that are called city directories. And I like to explain to students that they're like phone books before there were phones, although there were phones at this point in time in Salem. But they are an amazing resource that go year by year and provide an alphabetical listing of the people that were in Salem, their addresses, their occupations, so you can kind of trace people, but you can also trace community institutions and see how many trains a day came through Salem. What's the population? Where would you go get your mail? And those types of things that are sometimes lost in our discussions of history, those day-to-day things. So I think that's what we're going to focus on a little bit more, is what would be common knowledge in 1909 if you were living at Salem at the time that has changed, and kind of look at how communities change over time because of that.
That sounds fascinating, because how else are we going to really get an idea and a picture of what it was like then? You take the words, that's one thing, but you show people what was going on.
Yeah.
And piece it together. I'm sure you have oral histories from around all kinds of eras.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of recordings that come from like 1909, but
Not
we do
really,
have
no.
a lot of recordings from people that lived through that period. So that's another connection point to those eras.
Letters, in other words, people.
Documents.
Which brings me to your job as a curator of collections and all of that. What brought you to wanting to do that?
I love history, but I don't do a really good job about learning about history through history books. I think it's part of that conversation, but it's not always the whole understanding of it. So I love providing opportunities for informal learning and finding ways to use artifacts, use documents and other things to kind of get at the first draft of history in some way, more than what's been kind of distilled by historians and other things. So I like the idea of that, and being a part of preserving those community stories, because I think institutional community memory is something that is important. And it's important that we have those resources available and preserved for future generations. Yeah, and just to provide some perspective. But I like the idea of using history as a safer space to be able to develop critical thinking skills and empathy that's harder to do on more hot button topics. So we can talk about issues that may be happening today within the context of historical components and be able to do that in a little bit safer of an environment, if that makes sense.
And at the same time giving today's events some context.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, how did we get here?
Yep, yeah. And history repeats itself. I know that's a cliche, but it really does. And there's, and by looking back at how things happened, you can kind of use that as some data to talk about what solutions might be for the future as well. So what worked and what didn't.
And I have to say, I'm sure kids just absolutely love some of the things they see.
It's great. Well, with the Caralyn Shelton exhibit, one of the fun things we got to do is pull out some of the technology, and it's already, I mean, we didn't even open the exhibit yet, and I had it all kind of set up, but we've got a typewriter, we've got a stenograph, we've got an opportunity for you to practice shorthand, and all of these technologies that are not familiar to people today in our technological environment, and kind of start thinking about it, and it's fun to touch and to do and to see and that kind of thing, and think critically about how our lives are different because of the things that have changed. So
take us there.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go. Let's saddle up and go, everybody. Caralyn Shelton not only made history as the nation's first female governor, she shattered stereotypes about women. She was a stenographer, skilled at using a set of symbols and abbreviations to capture what people said as they said it accurately, essential in the law office where she worked. One of those lawyers, later Governor George Chamberlain, said she was as useful as a young lawyer would have been in preparing papers and looking after office business. That confidence led to Caralyn becoming Oregon governor for 3 days in 1909. She became an international celebrity. She was modest, saying, "I shall try to show that a woman can conduct the affairs of a governor's office as well as a man can." From orphan child to teenage widow, Caralyn is a compelling figure of Oregon and American history. Take a look for yourself at Caralyn B. Shelton, the nation's first female governor, an exhibit on display at Willamette Heritage Center until December 6th. Now here's a peek at the Southern Pacific Caboose, getting gussied up for its Summer of 1909 exhibit opening in September.
That's right, September 19th.
So tell us a little bit about what they can expect when they come here.
So we're really excited to be opening up this exhibit because it's going to really showcase the history of working on the railroad, not just on the trains themselves, but for the community that was living in the different communities the railroad ran through and maintained the tracks.
I understand that this was like building community through rail.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely connected all of the different communities together, all the different industries, and then all of the people that worked for the railroad and kept it running, which took a lot of people to keep us rolling.
Well, thank you for the sneak peek.
Of course.
It's amazing. Wish you could see it. You will. What on earth is in here?
Yeah, so we got the different tools of the trade, types of tools, and you can check out what each of them are. There we've got the coal box. You can see the coal bin for our stove. They would be heated through that direction. Lockers for the workers. And then the desk for the conductor, who's in charge of all of the freight. And then we're hoping we can connect people with stories around the caboose too through the window pull downs. Yeah. Well, a little messy at the moment, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
Were those tables or
No, these are bunks.
bunk beds?
Yeah, bunk beds. Yeah, so you can see actually on here. Keep the little guy sleeping, but yeah, you pull it down and. We didn't have bunks in our caboose, but we had the hardware for them, so they went and found another caboose near LC, and were able to reproduce them.
So here we are in front of the state capitol.
As it was.
As it was. Tell me about it.
Well, this building obviously doesn't look like the state capitol today. It was burned down in the 1930s and replaced by the building that we have today. But this is the capitol that Caralyn B. Shelton would have worked in.
Well, this has been fun. Really enjoyable. We don't want to give it all away. Come see this exhibit. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm glad we just had to see it ourselves.
It's always better in person.
Thank you for joining us today on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw with my guest, Kylie Pine.